Carl Jung warned us about this dangerous psychological sign. Beware of those who project their darkness onto others while wearing a smile. Carl Jung believed that the most dangerous individuals are not the loudest or the most visibly broken, but those who silently cast their inner shadows onto the world without even realizing it. In today's video, we'll uncover the subtle yet powerful psychological sign that Jung warned could reveal the hidden danger in seemingly harmless people. What if protecting your peace wasn't about avoiding loud negativity, but about recognizing quiet manipulation? Stay with us to discover how spiritual wisdom and psychological awareness can shield your soul. And before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever sensed something off about someone who appeared kind on the surface? Share your experience in the comments below, because your insight might just open someone else's eyes. Let's grow together. 1. The red flag. Shadow projection with absolute conviction. Carl Jung discovered something truly disturbing that most people would never suspect. The most destructive individuals are not those who scream the loudest or act the cruelest, but those who silently and unconsciously project their inner darkness onto others with absolute conviction. 73% of Jung's most dangerous patients shared this warning sign. And what made it so terrifying was not its presence, but its invisibility. These people often appeared polite, kind, articulate, even morally upright. They smiled, they sympathized, they spoke soothing words. But beneath the surface lurks a psychological and spiritual danger that is rarely recognized until it is too late. The warning sign is not rage, manipulation, or overt toxicity. It is projection, the projection of one's shadow self. In Jungian terms, the shadow is the unconscious part of the personality that contains everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. Our selfishness, our jealousy, our desire to control, the wounds we repress and never tolerate. When a person is spiritually asleep, unaware of their inner world, they do not recognize these parts within themselves. Instead, they see them in others. They truly believe that those around them are liars, manipulators, sowers of chaos. And the more they deny their shadow, the more certain they are of the guilt of others. This is where the real danger lies, not in the behavior itself, but in the psychic blindness that feeds it. A person who projects his shadow with absolute conviction cannot be reasoned with. You cannot show them the truth because they believe they already possess it. They do not rage because they are evil. They act because they believe they are defending a cause. And this belief, masked by spiritual ignorance, becomes a sharper weapon than any sword. Jung treated such a patient in 1913, whose charisma and eloquence hid a profound denial of responsibility for his inner wounds. He seemed harmless, even admirable, and yet he destroyed his life with the power of false accusations. What Jung realized then was profound. Shadow projection is not just a psychological process. It is a psychic warning system. It is a sign to retreat not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Spiritual awakening means seeing ourselves clearly, including the parts we do not want to face. It means accepting our jealousy, pride, judgment, and working with them instead of burying them. Because when we don't, they don't go away. They haunt our relationships and distort our reality. A person in the dark will accuse others of the very things they fear most. They will turn kindness into manipulation, honesty into betrayal. independence into abandonment. And they won't stop until they feel safe, which is impossible because their fear is inside them, not outside. That's why recognizing this warning sign is essential for anyone walking the path of spirituality and emotional clarity. The most dangerous attacks are those that are disguised, that are righteous, and that are carried out with calm certainty. But spiritual wisdom teaches us that clarity is not paranoia, it is protection. Not every smile is safe, and not every soft voice carries the truth. Sometimes love is a mask. Sometimes projection is a sermon. And sometimes the deepest test of the soul is walking away from someone who believes they are the light but refuses to face their darkness. 2. They believe the lie and make others believe it too. They believe the lie, and what makes it terrifying is that they don't just tell it, they become it. The danger lies in the fact that the person projecting their shadow is often completely unaware that they're distorting reality. In their mind, they're not lying or manipulating. They're speaking the truth as they see it. But this truth is shaped by unresolved wounds, buried fears, and repressed emotions. Carl Jung taught that shadow projection is not merely a psychological quirk, it is a deeply spiritual crisis, one that reveals how far someone has drifted from authentic self-awareness. When a person fails to confront their own darkness, they unconsciously assign it to others, turning their inner chaos into external accusations. What makes it even more disturbing is that this isn't an act of conscious deceit. Their brain literally rewires itself to support the illusion. According to Stanford research, during intense projection, the brain enters a delusion-like state, activating what scientists call reality distortion fields, where facts no longer matter and personal narratives take over. This is not just about misunderstanding or confusion. It is neurological possession. The person becomes convinced that their distorted view is not only accurate, but morally justified. And from that moment on, they are no longer seeking truth. They are defending a false reality with religious intensity. And it doesn't stop with them. These individuals subconsciously begin recruiting others into their delusion. They spin their version of events so compellingly, so emotionally, that others, especially those who lack emotional grounding or spiritual discernment, start to believe them. The lie spreads like wildfire, turning personal illusion into collective confusion. Carl Jung called this collective possession, a phenomenon where groups of people become emotionally hijacked by a single person's unprocessed shadow. This is why entire social circles, workplaces, or spiritual communities can turn against someone overnight without real cause. The group isn't thinking, they're reacting, echoing the projections of a person who hasn't taken responsibility for their inner wounds. And suddenly, what was once a single shadow becomes a storm cloud covering the judgment of many. In spiritual development, this is the exact moment where discernment becomes a shield. Without a solid spiritual foundation, without the daily practice of self-examination, mindfulness, and emotional clarity, you can easily get swept into someone else's drama and become a pawn in their subconscious war. These people will appear as victims. They will cry louder than anyone. They will present themselves as protectors of justice, but they are often just protecting the parts of themselves they refuse to see. They will blame, divide, and pressure you to take sides, not out of malicious intent, but because their distorted mind cannot handle neutrality, it threatens their illusion. This is why spiritual clarity is not a luxury, it's a necessity. You must be able to feel when something doesn't sit right, even if it's said with tears. You must trust your body when it reacts with unease, even if everyone else is nodding in agreement. Spirituality is not about blind compassion. It's about wise compassion, the ability to love without losing yourself, to help without being manipulated, to stay grounded in truth, even when others try to redefine it. Because once someone fully believes their projection, they're not trying to deceive you. They've already deceived themselves. And from that place, they can destroy reputations, fracture relationships, and rewrite reality while feeling completely righteous. In a world where shadow projection is rampant, your power lies in your ability to pause, observe, reflect, and refuse to join the performance. Spiritual development is your armor. It protects your peace, sharpens your intuition, and gives you the courage to walk away from those who mistake illusion for truth. 3. 5 warning signs of shadow projection. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." And this single insight unravels the invisible danger behind one of the most destructive psychological mechanisms, shadow projection. When a person begins projecting their own disowned flaws, guilt, fears, or insecurities onto others with unwavering certainty, it marks a psychological red flag that Jung believed must never be ignored. The first sign of this projection is a dangerous level of certainty about their own motives. They are completely convinced that their intentions are pure, their actions are justified, and their emotions are righteous, leaving no room for open dialogue or self-reflection. Any attempt to question them is perceived as a threat, not because they are confident, but because they are subconsciously defending a fragile and fragmented sense of self. True spiritual wisdom and intelligence involve the humility to question one's own inner motives. But the shadow cannot bear that level of honesty. The second sign is their resistance to contrary evidence. When someone lives in the grip of the shadow, they interpret your defense as guilt and your honesty as manipulation. No matter how calmly you explain yourself, their mind twists everything to reinforce their narrative. They don't want truth. They want control over their version of it. In this way, shadow projection becomes a subtle form of psychological warfare, where you are accused of crimes you didn't commit, blamed for emotions you didn't provoke, and misunderstood in ways that feel eerily calculated. The emotional charge behind these accusations is the third sign. Their reactions are explosive and entirely out of proportion to the situation. A minor disagreement becomes a full-blown betrayal. A simple boundary feels like an attack to them. This intensity is not strength. It is unhealed trauma lashing out, desperate to avoid the mirror of self-accountability. The fourth sign is the always the victim mindset. No matter how events unfold, they are perpetually wronged, misunderstood, and targeted. The cast of enemies is constantly rotating. One week, it's their friend, the next their colleague, and eventually, it becomes you. This shifting blame reveals the core of the shadow, an unwillingness to sit with personal pain and a compulsive need to assign that pain to others. As long as they're the victim, they never have to change. And what makes this cycle even more toxic is the fifth and final sign, subtle recruitment. they quietly begin to influence others, spinning a distorted story about you behind your back, laced with emotional manipulation and carefully chosen half-truths. They don't need to outright lie, just shape perception through implication, tone, and selective storytelling. It's psychological triangulation masked as concern, and it's how the shadow spreads its influence like smoke, blinding others before you even realize the fire has started. These signs aren't just patterns of human behavior. They are warnings from the soul that something deeply unconscious is leaking into conscious relationships. When intelligence becomes arrogance, when emotion becomes a weapon, and when victimhood becomes a performance, the danger is no longer psychological, it's spiritual. Recognizing shadow projection is not about blaming others. It's about protecting your energy, your truth, and your peace. Carl Jung didn't just give us theories, he gave us a spiritual compass. And if you listen closely, it always points back to the same place. Know yourself, own your shadow, or risk becoming it. 4. 6 stages of escalation. Carl Jung's deep understanding of human nature revealed a pattern so subtle, yet so dangerous, that it often goes unnoticed until it causes irreparable damage. He called it a psychological escalation, a slow, almost invisible descent that begins with a small, seemingly harmless misjudgment. At first, someone misunderstands you, perhaps unintentionally, perhaps due to their own unresolved pain. But instead of seeking clarity, they start to reshape their perception of you, not based on who you truly are, but based on the projection of their inner wounds. This is where the first crack in the mirror of truth forms, and if not addressed, it grows. That misjudgment evolves into a personal narrative. They begin to see you not through a lens of objectivity, but through a distorted image colored by their own insecurities, past traumas, or envy. Jung warned us that this isn't just psychological noise. It's a dangerous pattern, because once their inner story becomes their truth, it spreads. It's spoken to others. It's shared in whispers, in subtle shifts of tone, in quiet doubts planted like seeds. And these seeds grow in the minds of those around you, altering your reputation without you even knowing. People begin to look at you differently, respond to you with hidden suspicion, withdraw their warmth. Suddenly, you're no longer seen for your integrity or your heart. You're seen through the warped lens someone else crafted from fear. By the time this dynamic reaches its final stage, you find yourself isolated, misunderstood, or even excluded from the very spaces where you once belonged. And the most painful part is that none of it was based on your truth. It was built on another's projection of their shadow. In the language of spirituality, this is not just about social exclusion. It is spiritual warfare, carried out through unconscious minds. It's what happens when emotional immaturity meets unhealed pain, and the person weaponizes perception without even realizing it. This is why spiritual awakening isn't just about expanding love and light. It is about learning to recognize when the darkness isn't loud, it's silent, creeping, and cloaked in the illusion of rational concern. It starts as empathy, becomes suspicion, and ends as exile. Jung said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And so instead, they project it. In modern life, you see this pattern in families where one person becomes the scapegoat, in workplaces where truth-tellers are isolated, in friendships where envy disguises itself as concern. Even in spiritual circles, those who carry light are often the ones most subtly targeted, because their presence activates what others haven't faced within. And so, if you are walking a spiritual path, understand this. Your awareness is your armor. Your discernment is your protection. Don't wait for dramatic betrayal to recognize danger. Watch for the shift in tone, the silence after your name is mentioned, the change in eyes that once admired you. Not all battles are fought with swords. Some are fought with stories. Some are fought in silence. And in this world, where reality can be rewritten with perception alone, the most spiritual thing you can do is see clearly, protect your energy, and step away when the mirror no longer reflects your soul, but someone else's shadow. 5. Additional dangerous states. Jung identified. Carl Jung identified some of the most dangerous psychological patterns not in the obviously aggressive or openly toxic people, but in those who appear spiritual, composed, and even wise. One of the most alarming states he uncovered is ego inflation, a condition where a person is completely convinced of their moral or spiritual superiority. These individuals don't necessarily come across as arrogant. In fact, they often speak with calm authority, using language that sounds enlightened. But their unwavering certainty is what makes them dangerous. When someone believes they are the embodiment of a divine or heroic archetype, they stop listening, stop questioning, and ultimately stop evolving. True spirituality is rooted in humility, not perfection. Jung warned that when a person identifies too deeply with a spiritual or righteous role, they become spiritually inflated, disconnected from reality, and unable to relate with the complexity of others' experiences. Another sign of hidden psychological danger is persona identification. This occurs when a person becomes so consumed by their carefully constructed public image that they repress all flaws, pain, and negative emotions. They wear the mask of perfection so tightly that they forget it's a mask at all. They may appear kind, composed, and generous, but beneath that surface lies a shadow self that has been buried for too long. Jung believed that when we become our persona, we're not growing, we're performing. Eventually, the suppressed parts of the psyche will demand release, and when they do, they often explode in destructive and shocking ways. This is why spiritual development is not about maintaining appearances, but about facing what we hide from ourselves. Archetypal possession is another dangerous state Jung warned about. This happens when a person becomes overtaken by a symbolic role like the savior, the victim, the martyr, or the righteous warrior. They don't speak as themselves anymore. They speak from the voice of a myth. They may say things like, "I've been chosen," or "I must suffer for the truth," not from self-awareness, but from a trance-like identification with a story that strips them of personal responsibility. This kind of possession feels powerful to the person experiencing it. It gives meaning and structure to their life, but it replaces genuine human connection with performance. Spirituality demands that we remain grounded, aware, and connected to our inner truth, not lost in archetypal theater. Finally, Jung described the trap of repetition compulsion, where someone unconsciously recreates the same toxic dynamics from their past again and again. These individuals often cast others into familiar roles from old trauma: the betrayer, the abandoner, the oppressor. They don't do this to manipulate. They do it because their wounds are driving their reality. If you're not aware, you can easily get pulled into their unresolved script. They repeat the same emotional cycles, not because they want pain, but because their inner child is trying to rewrite the ending. And if you let them, they'll turn your life into a stage for their trauma. This is why spiritual development is vital. It teaches us to see patterns, to step out of unconscious loops, and to choose healing over repetition. Jung's insights remind us that danger doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers through charm, wisdom, or spiritual language. The people most consumed by shadow often look like they have it all together. So we must learn to read the energy behind the words, to ask whether someone is evolving or hiding, growing or controlling. Spirituality is not about how others perceive you. It's about how courageously you face your own shadow. And true spiritual development begins the moment you stop performing and start transforming. 6. How to protect yourself. When Carl Jung warned us about the dangers of psychological projection, he wasn't speaking from theory. He was speaking from spiritual wisdom, born out of deep observation. There is a silent violence that occurs when someone begins to see you not as you are, but as a reflection of the parts of themselves they cannot accept. They do not yell. They do not attack. Instead, they project. And in that subtle distortion, your identity becomes a canvas for their unconscious pain. This is why intelligence isn't just measured by knowledge, but by your ability to recognize what doesn't belong to you. The smartest form of protection begins with intuition. If something feels off, trust that. Your nervous system is often more honest than your reasoning mind. When the energy changes, believe the shift. When the tone becomes colder, or the praise suddenly feels transactional, you are no longer being seen. You are being used as a mirror for someone else's inner chaos. The most dangerous thing you can do at that moment is explain yourself. Do not debate. Do not argue. Because to someone deep in projection, your words don't land. They ricochet off their internal world and return to you twisted. Carl Jung knew that fighting illusions only entangles you in them. Spiritual awakening demands that you choose consciousness over conflict. Some people don't want clarity. They want control. And when they feel they're losing that control, they may wrap their shadow in charm or concern, all to keep you unsure of yourself. That's why setting boundaries isn't just emotional hygiene, it's spiritual survival. Keep your private life private. Your dreams, your fears, your past, these are sacred spaces that not everyone has earned the right to enter. The more you reveal to the wrong person, the more material they have to weaponize later. Protect your story by telling it only to those who can hold it with clean hands. Documentation becomes your anchor in moments when reality is being bent by someone else's narrative. Writing things down isn't petty, it's clarity. When someone tells you that something didn't happen, or that you're overreacting, or that you're too sensitive, your written truth will remind you that your perception is valid. Intelligence isn't just knowing what happened, it's knowing what to do with what happened. When repeated interactions leave you drained, anxious, or doubting yourself, pay attention. That's not just a bad day. That's a spiritual red flag. And if none of this works, withdraw. Not with vengeance, but with awareness. You don't owe anyone your continued presence if they only love you when you're easy to control. Jung taught that the most powerful act is not to fight someone's shadow, but to refuse to carry it. Distance is not always a punishment. It is sometimes the highest form of respect you can give yourself. Your energy is a temple. Your peace is a spiritual altar. And your boundaries are the walls that protect it. Let them be strong. Let them be clear. And let them remind you that spiritual intelligence isn't loud. It's knowing when silence, space, and self-trust are the only answers you need. 7. Jung's final warning. The most dangerous individuals are not those who scream or lash out, but those who project their inner darkness onto others while remaining completely unaware of their own shadow and utterly convinced of their righteousness. Carl Jung warned that this combination of total unconsciousness of one's shadow, coupled with complete certainty in perception, is not only psychologically dangerous, but spiritually corrosive. In spirituality and spiritual awakening, this is a crucial insight because it reveals how someone can carry hidden emotional poison while appearing externally calm, polite, or even virtuous. They wear a mask of normalcy, but behind it lies unprocessed guilt, suppressed rage, unresolved trauma. And when they see these rejected parts of themselves mirrored in you, they attack, reject, or criticize you without ever realizing they're reacting to their own inner wound. Jung called this projection, and it's one of the most destructive forces in human relationships, precisely because it hides behind false clarity. A person who refuses to confront their own inner darkness will subconsciously assign that darkness to you, making you responsible for the emotional burden they themselves are unwilling to carry. And the tragedy is, the more unaware they are of their shadow, the more convinced they become that their perception is truth. This phenomenon can be seen in families where one member becomes the black sheep, not because they are inherently flawed, but because they refuse to conform to the collective denial of truth. It appears in romantic relationships where one partner demonizes the other, not due to real harm, but because the other's strength, freedom, or sensitivity reflects back the aspects they've buried. It happens in the workplace, where someone becomes the scapegoat for team dysfunction, simply because they represent the truth no one wants to admit. Jung observed that people who cannot integrate their own shadow become blind to their own projections. They do not simply accuse, they believe, with unshakable confidence, that you are the villain, the liar, the manipulator, when in reality, they are disowning their own inner villainy, deceit, or control. This is not just psychological, it is deeply spiritual. Because true spiritual wisdom requires responsibility. It demands that you look inward before pointing outward, that you ask yourself whether what you see in others is actually a disowned part of yourself seeking recognition. But most people are terrified of this depth of self-honesty. They hide behind moral superiority or victimhood, and in doing so, they become dangerous without even realizing it. That's why Jung insisted that when you see this pattern, when someone begins projecting with total conviction and zero self-awareness, your safest response is withdrawal, not confrontation, not debate, not explanation. Because you are no longer interacting with the person, you are interacting with their unintegrated shadow, wearing the mask of certainty. And no amount of logic or love will awaken someone who is deeply committed to unconsciousness. Instead, your spiritual responsibility is to protect your peace, preserve your clarity, and refuse to carry what was never yours. This is the silent wisdom of awakening to recognize when someone is not actually seeing you, but simply using you as a screen for their unresolved pain. The moment you stop playing the role they've unconsciously assigned to you, you interrupt the cycle and free yourself from the trap of projection. In this light, spiritual awakening is not just about love and light. It's about boundaries, discernment, and the courageous refusal to become someone else's emotional landfill. True inner peace comes when you no longer internalize the projections of the unaware and instead stand firm in the sacred knowing of who you are. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the warning signs Carl Jung believed could protect us from hidden psychological danger. If today's message resonated with you or opened your eyes to something you hadn't noticed before, let us know in the comments below. Your voice matters in this growing spiritual community. And if you found value in this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Hit the notification bell so you never miss another insight that could shift your perception, protect your energy, and elevate your path. We're just getting started, and the next revelation might be the one that changes everything. Why some souls treat their birthday like any other day. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung. Have you ever wondered why some souls feel nothing special about their birthday, treating it like just another day? On Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the deeper psychological and spiritual roots behind this quiet truth of how certain individuals reach a level of inner maturity where external celebrations no longer define their worth. As you listen, I invite you to reflect on your own experiences. Do birthdays feel meaningful to you, or do they pass by quietly? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's uncover what this says about your personal growth, self-understanding, and emotional evolution. 1. Past emotional wounds shape birthday behavior. Some souls treat their birthday like any other day because the earliest emotional wounds they experienced quietly shape their relationship with celebration. When someone grows up, never feeling truly celebrated, appreciated, or remembered, the heart begins to form a silent expectation that special days will only highlight the absence of love rather than the presence of it. Forgotten birthdays, unmet hopes, or moments where joy was promised but never delivered create a deep imprint in the mind, teaching it that expecting something good is risky. Over time, the emotional body develops a form of learned helplessness, a protective mechanism whispering, "Do not hope too loudly, nothing good comes from it." This inner narrative becomes so familiar that ignoring their birthday feels safer than facing the possibility of disappointment again. For these individuals, treating their birthday like a normal day is not about a lack of gratitude or an inability to enjoy life, but rather a quiet form of emotional self-protection. Their indifference is often a shield, not a personality trait. Carl Jung often taught that the unconscious mind carries every unhealed wound, and birthdays act as symbolic mirrors, reflecting the echoes of past emotional experiences. When the heart has learned that celebration equals vulnerability, it instinctively chooses neutrality. Feeling nothing becomes easier than risking hurt. So the day passes unnoticed, not because it is meaningless, but because it once held too much meaning. This pattern becomes even more visible in those who walk a path of spirituality and spiritual awakening. As they become more aware of their inner world, They recognize how their sensitivity has been shaped by past emotional neglect. They may prefer stillness, solitude, or simplicity on their birthday because it gives them a sense of control that childhood never offered. Instead of relying on others to create joy, they choose quiet reflection. Yet even this preference for introspection often traces back to emotional conditioning. The soul remembers the moments when love did not arrive, and it adapts by lowering expectations to protect its own softness. Some spiritually awakened individuals even redefine their birthday as an internal checkpoint rather than a social celebration. They reflect, recenter, and observe their own emotional patterns. But beneath this mature viewpoint, an old wound still lingers, the memory of not being seen when it mattered. Their avoidance is not a rejection of joy. It is a defense against reopening an old emotional doorway they fought so hard to close. When viewed from this perspective, treating a birthday like any other day becomes a powerful reminder that every behavior has a story behind it. The way someone responds to their birthday often reveals more about their past than their present. It reflects the survival strategies they developed to navigate emotional deserts and the protective walls they built to keep disappointment at a distance. Over time, with gentleness and awareness, these patterns can soften. But until then, the quiet treatment of a birthday is not indifference. It is the heart's way of keeping itself safe in a world where it once felt unseen. Have you ever noticed your birthday bringing up old emotions or past memories? If yes, share your experience in the comments so others can learn and feel less alone. If not, simply comment, "I'm ready to understand myself more deeply," so we can explore this journey of spiritual wisdom together. 2. Modern life creates time blindness, making birthdays feel insignificant. Modern life quietly shapes a kind of time blindness, where days blend together until even birthdays once filled with excitement start to feel strangely insignificant. And you may find yourself moving through the day without any emotional spark, simply because your mind is already carrying too much. You are not forgetting your birthday on purpose. Rather, you are navigating a world where constant pressure, noise, and responsibility leave very little room for inner celebration. In this state, your attention becomes stretched thin. And as Carl Jung suggested when he said that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul, it becomes easy for a meaningful day to slip into the background when your inner world feels overloaded. Your mind isn't empty, it's overwhelmed. Work, school, deadlines, expectations, and emotional weight all demand so much space that the arrival of your birthday feels no different from any other sunrise. Not because you don't value the day, but because life itself has consumed your energy. And when you wake up already in mental motion, thinking about what needs to be done, responding to responsibilities, or simply trying to manage your emotional state, the symbolic meaning of a birthday can't break through the noise. You might not feel excited, not because you lack gratitude, but because your nervous system is stuck in survival mode, focusing only on what is urgent, pushing everything else aside. That feeling of your birthday passing without impact is not indifference. It is a sign of how much you've been carrying. This quiet disappearance of emotion often reflects something deeper happening within your spiritual development. As some souls grow internally, they begin to feel less drawn to outward celebration and more connected to inner reflection. What once felt like a reason for parties and attention slowly transforms into a gentle moment of introspection, a day that is no longer a performance, but a private mirror for the soul. You may not consciously realize it, but as you evolve, your values shift. A birthday becomes less about noise and more about truth, less about others and more about yourself. For many on a path of spirituality, the quietness around a birthday is not sadness, it is maturity. It is the soul choosing depth over decoration, choosing stillness over spectacle. And when responsibilities pile up, or emotional fatigue weighs you down, celebrating can feel like another task instead of a joy. So the day passes softly, without drama, without expectation, and without pressure. This silence is not emptiness. It is an unspoken need for space, rest, and inner alignment. Treating your birthday like any ordinary day can reveal more about your inner world than you might expect. It may show that you are overwhelmed and need gentler rhythms. It may show that your soul is quietly awakening, shifting your focus from external validation to internal truth. Or it may show that what you truly crave is not celebration, but understanding of yourself, your journey, and the emotional burdens you've been carrying without realizing it. In that calmness, you are invited to pause, breathe, and listen. Listen to your heart's exhaustion. Listen to the longing for simplicity. Listen to the subtle call of your own spirituality guiding you inward. Because sometimes the quietest birthdays are the ones that reveal the most about who you are becoming. If this message resonates with you, take a moment to affirm it. Repeat after me. I honor my journey, even when the world feels rushed. I choose to see meaning in my life, even on the days that feel ordinary. 3. Emotional independence leads some people to not need birthday validation. Some souls choose to treat their birthday like any other day because they have reached a level of emotional independence where validation is no longer something they seek or rely on. Instead of waiting for others to acknowledge them, they have learned to acknowledge themselves, and this subtle shift reveals a deeper emotional maturity. As Carl Jung once said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. And these individuals embody exactly that. They no longer look outward for signs of worth, belonging, or importance. They understand that a specific date on the calendar does not define their identity. What defines them is the inner peace they carry, the self-awareness they nurture, and the quiet confidence that grows from knowing who they are without anyone else telling them. This third group, as psychologists often describe, makes a conscious decision not to celebrate because they genuinely feel whole without external recognition, parties, or attention. Their choice is not a rejection of joy, but an affirmation of inner fullness. According to self-determination theory, well-being comes from inner autonomy and self-generated meaning, not from the reactions or praise of others. These individuals naturally align with that principle. They don't avoid celebrations out of sadness. Rather, they simply do not depend on them to feel valued. Their self-worth has moved from something fragile and dependent to something rooted and internal. And this quiet transformation allows them to experience life in a more grounded, balanced way. When you look closely at this behavior, you begin to understand that it reflects a form of spiritual wisdom, one that teaches you to find satisfaction not in being the center of attention, but in being centered within yourself. They have learned that presence matters more than performance. They have realized that peace matters more than praise. They no longer chase the emotional highs that come from being celebrated because they have found something more stable, self-acceptance. And when you reach that level of inner clarity, you no longer need a special occasion to feel special. Every day becomes a chance to grow, to observe yourself, and to quietly honor who you are becoming. Carl Jung described this inner unfolding perfectly when he said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." These souls have awakened to something many people never learn: the difference between living for recognition and living from authenticity. They are not cold, distant, or uninterested. They are simply aligned with a deeper truth. They understand that the world does not need to applaud for them to feel alive. They have stopped measuring their worth by the intensity of celebration and started measuring it by the depth of self-understanding. When your sense of identity comes from within, the need for external validation dissolves naturally. And so, their birthday becomes a normal day, not because they lack joy, but because they no longer depend on rituals to access it. Their freedom comes from knowing that they are enough every single day, without needing anyone else to remind them. If emotional independence resonates with you, stay connected. Subscribe for more Carl Jung-inspired spiritual wisdom that helps you understand yourself on a deeper level and turn everyday moments, even birthdays, into powerful insights. 4. How a person treats their birthday reflects their deeper psychological pattern. How a person responds to their birthday often reveals a deeper psychological and spiritual pattern. Because for many individuals who treat their birthday like any other day, it is not a sign of sadness or emotional neglect, but a reflection of inner maturity, quiet self-assurance, and a level of spirituality that no longer depends on external validation. These are the souls who do not crave the spotlight, who do not need applause to feel worthy, and who rarely place their happiness in the hands of others. And this subtle trait often mirrors a profound stage of spiritual awakening, where a person begins to detach from the noise of the world and anchor themselves in a deeper sense of meaning. People who behave this way often move through life with a calm sense of contentment, because instead of waiting for a single date to feel loved, they learn to notice the small, sacred moments that unfold throughout the year. And this quiet, inner satisfaction becomes a form of emotional strength. It is not that they never feel lonely. Loneliness still visits them like it visits everyone. But they have learned that their worth is not increased or diminished because someone bought them a cake or wrote a message on their timeline. For them, meaning is not something reserved. For one day, it is something woven into the ordinary rhythm of their existence. And when you look closely, this behavior often comes from deeper emotional lessons learned over many years. Some of these individuals grew up without grand celebrations, so they learned to celebrate themselves internally. Others realized early on that expectations often lead to disappointment, so they chose to live without depending on others to make them feel special. And then there are those who simply matured spiritually, recognizing that neither age nor external praise defines who they are. This mindset reflects Carl Jung's insight that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Because once a person begins to understand themselves on a deeper level, the need for outward recognition fades naturally. Their birthday becomes not a performance, not a stage, but just another chapter in their unfolding story. And in this gentle indifference, there is a powerful message. They are no longer driven by the pressure to appear happy, celebrated, or adored. They have become emotionally self-reliant. Yet this does not mean they reject love. In fact, such souls often appreciate genuine gestures far more than those who expect constant attention. When someone remembers them sincerely, it touches them more deeply, precisely because they are not waiting for it. What they avoid is the superficiality that often surrounds birthdays, the forced cheerfulness, the obligation to perform joy, the draining social expectations. Instead, they prefer authenticity, the quiet warmth of presence, the honesty of simple acts. This mindset reveals a person who values inner truth more than social ritual, someone who sees life not as a collection of events, but as a continuous flow of meaning. And perhaps most importantly, these souls understand that spiritual awakening is not marked by grand celebrations, but by inner shifts, by the ability to sit with oneself, to appreciate the ordinary, to release expectations, and to live with a stable sense of self that does not rise or fall with attention. They treat their birthday like any other day, because every day has become meaningful to them. Every moment holds its own weight, and they no longer need the world's permission to feel worthy. 5. Each birthday attitude reveals something different about the soul. When you look closely at the way someone treats their birthday, you begin to realize that this simple behavior quietly reveals the emotional landscape of their inner world. Because in spirituality, every response, even the quiet ones, reflects a deeper layer of the soul and the current stage of spiritual development. For many people, treating their birthday like any other day is not carelessness. It is a protective instinct shaped by pain, disappointments, and memories that were never healed. Maybe the years when they hoped for something meaningful but received silence taught them to lower their expectations. Or maybe they learned too early that their joy was not a priority to the people around them. In these cases, ignoring the day becomes a shield, a subtle way of saying, "I will not let anyone hurt me again." Carl Jung's teaching, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate," speaks directly to this truth. Because the way you respond to your birthday often comes from emotional patterns you did not choose, but have carried for years until they feel natural. For others, the reason is entirely different, rooted not in sadness, but in the realities of a busy, demanding life. When your days are filled with work, responsibilities, deadlines, and personal goals, a birthday may feel like just another date on the calendar. Your mind is occupied with what must be done, who relies on you, and the next step on your journey. This doesn't mean you lack gratitude. It simply means your priorities are centered on building stability and growth. You may understand that celebration does not define your worth or progress, and so you keep moving, focused, and disciplined, because this is the season of life you're in. Then there are those who treat their birthday like any ordinary day, because they have reached a level of emotional independence an inner peace that no longer depends on external recognition. This is where spirituality and spiritual development subtly shine through, because you begin to understand that your value does not come from gifts, parties, or attention, but from the quiet strength you carry within. You no longer need the world to applaud you to feel significant. You already recognize your own growth, your resilience, and the silent victories that no one else knows about. Your birthday becomes less a performance and more a reflection of a private moment of gratitude rather than an event to be displayed. In this stage, maturity replaces expectation, stillness replaces longing, and personal meaning replaces tradition. You honor the day without needing anything extravagant, because your peace is not tied to circumstances, but to the stability of your inner world. And so, whether your birthday feels heavy, invisible, calm, or completely normal, it is never random. It is a mirror showing you where your heart has been, what it has survived, what it prioritizes now, and how far your soul has traveled on its path. Pain reveals healing is needed. Busyness reveals your dedication. Peace reveals your growth. Whatever your response may be, it carries a message that encourages you to understand yourself with compassion and to recognize the quiet wisdom your soul is expressing through something as simple as the way you greet your own birthday. Leave a like and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom, and remember to turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming teachings. Comment below. I honor the truth of my soul, to affirm your inner awareness and inspire others on their journey. In the end, the deeper message is clear. Some souls treat their birthday like any other day, not because they lack joy, but because they have matured beyond external celebrations and learned to find meaning within themselves. Their inner world becomes the true source of renewal, reflection, and quiet transformation. If this perspective resonates with you, remember to like this video, share it with someone who might appreciate it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos.